This is Train to Perform, the undisputed alpha podcast in training, fitness, and sports performance. Here, you'll develop your skills with the cold, hard facts in fitness, sports performance, recovery, and nutrition. Real, tried and true, evidence-based facts that have been proven to move you faster, move you stronger, and move you forward. Now, here's your host of Train to Perform, Julian Sisman.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Train to Perform podcast. Today, honestly, he's one of my mentors. I've learned a lot from Todd over the past few years that I've met him a few years ago. Just so much information. And I still pick his brain to this day. As you can see from this podcast, you're going to get a lot of information, a lot of great information, especially for those of you that are having a hard time with weight loss and fat loss. We really dive deep into the, weight loss industry, and really try to, provide you guys again with the reason why I created this podcast, with the correct information, the information that's going to give you long-term success, happiness, long-term health. And so I hope you guys really enjoy this. And please, if you enjoy this podcast and listen to the whole thing, please rate it, give me a rating, please. I appreciate it. And pass this along to anybody else that you may find this to be helpful. And here it is. Thank you. What's going on?
Nothing. What's going on with you?
Just trying to make everything work out here.
I hear you, man. Sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's
killing you.
Honestly, like at the beginning, yeah. Obviously you can't go to the gym. So
yeah.
Just figuring out a way to, move everything online for the time being, was the move.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, I was able to get a decent amount of people moved online. So just continuing kind of just like basically live Zoom workouts.
Right.
Some people have stuff they use at home. They just didn't like the live workout. So I was using like app-based
stuff.
And so I was just programming them workouts and just try to like continue communication with whoever needed stuff. And so yeah, I made it work. Now that, Maryland and Virginia are kind of like in the same place, things have kind of like changed. Been able to use the gym a little bit, go outside, and so just making it work.
Yeah,
figuring it out.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, how's everything with you?
It's pretty hectic.
Really?
GW's fucking, they're going crazy, man.
Really?
Yeah. They're like, well, it's just an enormous financial loss for them.
Okay.
Like having to cancel most of the fall semester and not having students come back and things like, with a tuition-driven school, our commits for the fall are like down like 15 or 20% or something like that. So they're predicting that it's going to be about $115 million loss.
So they're not going to school in the fall, or
They are, but we're going to be operating at, I think they have to keep social distancing in place. And GW has come up with their own social distancing guidelines and their own plan that's more stringent than the district. So, every student has to be masked. There's going to be temperature checks going in every room and sanitation and things like that. Every student and every faculty and every staff is going to be tested. So it's and then there's a lot of things about athletics and return to play and all that kind of stuff. It's an enormous undertaking.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure it's almost very similar at every other university.
Oh yeah.
Across the country.
Everybody's going through the same thing.
Yeah. I've trained a few kids that are going to play like sports. We have a few kids that come, and some of them, it's like they haven't even heard anything.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. It's
a lot of schools don't know yet.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And especially when you're in a state where, like in Texas, they're having this resurgence of cases, and Florida, those schools may have had a plan in place, and then all of a sudden, who knows? Within a month, all that could change, and there could be another quarantine. So who knows?
Yeah.
The fall is just going to be, actually, the whole next academic year is just going to be a fucking nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it's going to be a nightmare until at least something is.
So there's a vaccine, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't know, you can't really trust
right.
come out. Like something that's useful.
Right. Let's crank out a vaccine.
Yeah, it's like, let's crank one out.
Let's see how much good comes from that.
It's crazy. So since you haven't been going to like obviously the campus, like, do you are you just doing kind of like your Miller method stuff, or
that's all we're doing?
So you can't do anything school related. I don't think so.
No,
that's crazy.
No.
I mean, how's that going? Miller method.
It's going good now because Steph lost her job at GW because we're not reopening the lab. So that's staying closed. So I'm going to be, I will be teaching full time, but I'm still not going to be going to Foggy Bottom. I'll probably just be going to the lab, and it's not even going to be open. It's just, that's going to be my office, just because GW doesn't want anybody coming to campus that doesn't have to. Right. So I teach online anyway. So I'll go to the Virginia campus and teach my classes online there, where all my setup is.
Yeah.
But that's it. So, yeah.
So as I kind of send you those questions, typically how I start is to kind of like give a little background on, how you got to where you are, especially because, you're obviously a professor and you've been around for a while, and you kind of dabbled with, a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
Especially a couple of different schools. And remind me like exactly where you're from. Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah. Allentown, PA.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And then you went to Penn State.
Mm-hmm. I did my undergrad at Penn State, my PhD at Texas A&M. Well, I was in the Coast Guard for 4 years first.
Okay. Where'd you do your master's in between, or was it like a combo?
I didn't do a master's. So I did my undergrad at Penn State. I started in a master's program at Texas A&M.
Okay.
But then I just switched right into a doctoral program. So I just went straight through. So I have an undergraduate degree and a PhD. I don't have any masters.
Yeah, that's cool. So when you were at Texas A&M, like, what was your dissertation on? Like, what did you like?
I was a GA with the athletic department for 6 years, but while I was doing that, I was also working in the lab of Michael Delp, who was a NASA-funded researcher. So I was doing NASA research as my dissertation. So my dissertation work wasn't performance related. I essentially was looking at how intramuscular connective tissue atrophies and disuse atrophy with long-term space travel. So, I was basically looking at exercise countermeasures to prevent cardiovascular and musculoskeletal atrophy with microgravity.
That's pretty sweet. So basically, like, what would happen to somebody when they go in space, and like how long it takes to atrophy, or?
Yeah. So it's pretty well known that when you go to space, there's muscular atrophy and bone loss, and it's mainly in the ambulatory muscles or the weight-bearing muscles on Earth. So, when you're walking around at Earth, if you're 200 pounds, your legs are constantly carrying around 200 pounds, or at least your upper half. So, that constant loading at 1G is it might not seem like it's a resistance training protocol, but it really is, right? You're just really used to it. Well, when you go to microgravity, or when you're traveling through space and you're actually at 0G, like if you're on the space station or something like that, when you're at 0G, you've now unloaded those legs. There's no reason to have that muscle. There's no reason to have that bone mass, right? Because I want to get from one end of the shuttle to the other, I just push against the wall with my hand and I float to the other side, right? So, having all that muscle mass, there's no need for it. So you lose it. And but you lose it mainly in the weight-bearing limb. So your arms won't get smaller because your arms aren't loaded at 1G.
Mm-hmm.
Your legs are loaded at 1G. So when you go to microgravity, that's where you have those losses. So, the problem with that is that's not so much a problem. That's a beautiful adaptation to microgravity. The problem is when you come back to Earth or some other gravitational environment. So, the major problem here is with Mars exploration. You leave the Earth's gravitational pull, and then you're in you're in zero gravity until you get to Mars. And who knows, that trip is what, a year and a half or something like that. So then, you get to Mars, and now you're at something like, I think it's 30% gravity or something like that. So now, if you're at 30% gravity and you're putting on a spacesuit, and you jump out of the space shuttle or jump out of the capsule and fall and break your leg because it's all weak. Yeah. Now you're laying on Mars with a broken leg. You're screwed at that point. You're dead, right? You're not coming back. So that's the main problem with long-term space travel. It's not so much the microgravity; it's the return to a gravitational environment after being exposed to zero G for so long.
When they come back, though, is there some type of you have to go to a certain place to kind of do rehab, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you come back, they do put you through various tests, the 10-minute stand test, where you're basically see if you can stand. And the major problem is orthostatic intolerance, where you can't stand because of low blood pressure, because of pooling in the limbs and things like that. But muscle is very plastic. It comes back really fast. It's really the bone loss is what takes much, much longer to recover, if it recovers at all. So that's one of the major issues. Muscle's not that much of a big deal. It just comes right back.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, wow, that's pretty crazy. So they can lose significant bone.
Oh yeah.
Wow. And obviously it take what
1% per month or something like that.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, and it depends on how much you have to begin with. I think the lighter you are, the less you'll lose.
Okay.
Because you're less loaded.
Yeah.
At 1G, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So and it's interesting because there's a lot of NASA has to be very creative about when you're talking about long-term space travel, because it's all resources. You have to take everything, or you have to be able to create it while you're there. So, they examine everything. And women, I think, because of the protective effects of estrogen and things like that, women lose less bone in space than men do. Mm-hmm. Or at least that used to be from the research that I remember. So, if that would be the case, then women would be better candidates for long-term space travel.
Yeah, that makes sense. So once you finished there, did you go straight to DW, or was there an in-between?
When I left Texas A&M, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and I worked in the Department of Microbiology. And one of the things that I got interested in when I was doing the NASA research was really and this relates to training, how does the mechanical signal of, say, lifting a weight, for example, if I pick up a dumbbell and lift that weight, how does the mechanical signal of lifting that weight ultimately go into a muscle cell and tell that cell to change its protein synthesis or something like that? So that whole process is called mechanotransduction. Okay. And mechanotransduction really relates to any sort of mechanical interface between a cell and something else. So when I was at University of Pennsylvania, basically what I studied was integrin-mediated interactions between cells and connective tissue. So in other words, you have a muscle that's surrounded by collagen. The muscle is held together by connective tissue. Mm-hmm. So what I would study would be, how does a mechanical signal go through that connective tissue and ultimately get into the muscle cell to tell that muscle cell to adapt? So, and specifically when I did my dissertation research, what I looked at was how intramuscular connective tissue specifically atrophies or deteriorates with microgravity, and how does that affect cell signaling to muscle. So I sort of did the not quite the same kind of thing at the University of Pennsylvania, but I essentially studied cell to matrix interactions in breast cancer. So that's what I did there. And then after I left, and then 9/11 happened. Okay. And when 9/11 happened, I was in a microbiology lab in Philadelphia when 9/11 happened, and then everybody was switching over to anthrax research and all that kind of stuff. So that's when I got out of there, and I took a job at East Stroudsburg University in Pennsylvania. And I was only there for like 3 years before then I went to GW. So in 2005, I came to GW.
Oh, okay, sweet. So when you, but obviously at GW, you didn't initially have the lab.
No.
Did you? So you basically created that.
Yeah. So when I got to GW in 2005, well, there was no graduate major, there was no graduate degree in strength and conditioning either when I got to GW. So I created that too. So the first thing I did was create the graduate degree in strength and conditioning, the graduate concentration in strength and conditioning at GW. And that was residential. That was in person. And then in 2013, I moved out to Ashburn and opened the weight management and human performance lab. And right around that time was when the master's program went online. So now the master's in strength and conditioning is online. And I run the lab in Ashburn, which, as I said, is likely not going to remain open, at least not for this year.
Yeah. I mean, that place is crazy.
Yeah.
So honestly, like I've been obviously I finished my master's. I'm actually starting my doctorate in August.
Oh yeah, congratulations
at Rocky Mountain University.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, your lab is like the only lab I've like ever like been in like that, because most of the class like was for my master's was online. So.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that I had to, utilize or whatever, it was just like, where I was, or just research and just kind of like learning about it. Especially because like there was like a class I took on, like technology,
mm-hmm.
all this, GPS and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously I didn't have that stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, the lab is. I would hate to see it go because it's.
Yeah, I know it's a great place.
It's a great. No, I mean, there's not that many around here like that.
No, there really isn't. And there are labs that. There are some universities, places that have the equipment, but it's not available to the public.
No.
So you can't even get in the room. You know? So yeah, it is nice to have those facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and mainly we haven't talked about what we do there, but mainly DEXA, metabolism testing, a lactate threshold testing, VO2 max testing, all kinds of exercise performance testing, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So when I first went there a few years ago, it was mostly like aerobic and anaerobic testing. So you had the bite, you had the VO2.
Mm-hmm.
We had RMR testing, the DEXA.
Mm-hmm.
Did you add in some strength stuff? Because I know one time I went there, you had like plates.
We do. We have 3 platforms. We 3 sets of Olympic plates. We have a couple of Rogue power racks. We have a full power lift rack with a full set of weights. So there's lifting equipment there as well. Yeah.
Were you using, so kind of going on to the next thing. So now I know you developed Miller Method at the same time. Obviously you're probably using the lab as like an assessment center to help people. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. So the lab, the main function of the lab was to provide public testing and weight loss programming, fat loss strategies using metabolism testing and DEXA and those other types of technologies that are really generally have been reserved for research type settings.
Yeah.
Right? So our philosophy is that those technologies are available enough and cost effective enough that they really should be used as part of the standard of care for weight management. And a lot of people balk at that, saying, you can't expect that everybody who wants to lose weight to get a metabolism test. And to that, I say, yes, I do have that expectation. Because if we can expect everybody to get on a scale, which is a silly thing in my mind to do, then why doesn't it make sense to expect everybody to get a metabolism test? And I know people are going to say, well, they can't afford it and things like that. And usually those responses come from people who aren't really aware of how available it really is.
Yeah. I mean, even even when I was coming to you, obviously there was not much around. And I know I had asked you a question like years ago about it, and you said some company was going to come start some type of like testing that you could bring to the air that was going to come to the area. But then recently I looked up a place, and they have a place in Bethesda. It's called Composition ID.
Mm-hmm.
And they do the same exact stuff you do there. And
yeah, they've been around a long time.
It's equally cost wise, like you were doing. And, I tell all the people that I work with, I'm like, if you really want real, like hardcore results, like get these 2 tests first, see where you need to start, and then use those to like, especially because, and I talked to Stephanie about this. It's like people all they worry about is like, eating. Like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. I'm like, the reason you don't know how many calories you can eat or what you need to eat to perform at a high level, especially if you're an athlete, is because you're going to use some app that is so inaccurate because it's using such a like weird equation that's like, to me and you, we know that it's like, they even say that it's not like the most accurate. And I tell them, I'm like, look, like these 2 tests, it only have to do it like once or twice a year. You're the game changer in where you want to be. So,
hey, Julian, can I share my screen?
Yeah.
I want to show you something on this topic. Let me see. You have to allow me to share it. You disabled it, so you have to allow me to share it. I'm not exactly sure how you do that.
Let me see here.
Otherwise, I can just email you the slide and you can put it up. Are you going to edit all this when we're done?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, you can just email it to me. I mean, hold on. So yeah, I mean, that's did I allow you?
Hold on. Yes, you did. Okay. Right. So here for this slide, basically what we did was, and this is exactly what we're talking about, prediction equations. You said that most people determine their caloric need based on an app. So if you download your MyFitnessPal or Fat Secret or something like that, it'll ask you to put in your height, weight, gender, age, and it'll tell you this is what your predicted metabolism is. That predicted metabolism is represented on this graph by the red line. Okay, so the red line is the predicted value. Each dot on the graph is a subject, and each number within the dot represents how far that subject's RMR, expressed as a percent, is away from the predicted value. So, for example, if you look at, there's a dot up here. I don't know if you can see the mouse moving, but there's a dot up here that says a 38 in it. That person has a metabolism that's 38% faster than the predicted value. And then you have people down here who have metabolism that's 19% slower, 16% slower. The thing that we want people to pay attention to is look how many of those values actually fall on the red line, right?
Yeah.
Very few of them actually fall on the red line. So when people say, well, the predictive equations are better than nothing, we literally say, no, they are not better than anything, right? They aren't better than nothing. So, I would much rather talk to somebody for 10 minutes and give them a calorie prescription than know nothing about them and have a prediction equation. Okay. So the point is they're just not accurate enough to trust. And we know that a 100 or 200 calorie surplus every day, you're not going to be able to lose fat. You're going to be gaining fat, right? So you can see that by relying on these apps, it's very much a shot in the dark as to whether you get lucky enough, your RMR falls on the line. And then not only is the RMR a problem, the more, I think, more important problem is that they then use an activity multiplier. Well, they'll say, well, are you sedentary? Are you moderately active? Are you highly active? That activity multiplier then just multiplies the error that's found in the metabolism prediction, right? So this is where the problem comes in. When you use these things, you end up almost always overfeeding the person. The person can't lose fat, and usually they gain fat. So we just don't use them. And we tell people, look, if you can't get your metabolism measured, I'm sorry, we're just not going to be able to work with you.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
that's so true. I've never seen anything like this, and this is kind of shocking because even the fact that like majority of the numbers are above the line, so that means like
right. You would think that you would mistakenly be put in a deficit,
yeah,
but you're not, because the physical activity multiplier overcompensates for it.
yeah,
Right? Because they'll always tell you, well, you should never eat at the RMR. Don't eat at the RMR. Well, that's crazy. I mean, if you're 500 pounds, you might have an RMR of 4,000 calories. Are you going to tell somebody they need to eat 4,000 calories? They don't need it. Their RMR is 4,000 calories because they're 500 pounds,
yes,
right?
yes.
So, yeah. People have this thing like, well, you shouldn't eat below the RMR, but it's nonsense. You know, it's not that you can't eat below the RMR. You just have to make sure that the deficit's not too big.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean, when you do the RMR and then when you get the bod pod, like, kind of explain like how somebody would use those numbers.
So if you have a body composition and a metabolism test.
Yeah, so like I come to you and I'm like, hey, I want the body composition test, I want the RMR test, I want to use these to, majority of people are going to ask for fat loss, right?
Yeah. Okay, so here's how the plan goes. Somebody comes in and you measure the body composition, and there's two reasons why you measure the body composition. One, you want to know baseline where they're starting, right? You want to know how much fat they have on them, because when you test them later, you need to know how much they lost or gained, right? So you need the baseline value. The second thing is we use the muscle value, the fat-free mass value we get from the DEXA scan.
Mm-hmm.
We use that fat-free mass value to determine what your protein intake should be.
Yep.
Okay, so that piece of the DEXA scan gives us those two pieces of critical information: how much protein are you going to eat, and what is your baseline levels of fat and muscle. And then let's say we'll do a metabolism test, and the metabolism test tells us calorically how much we're going to feed that person. Okay,
bare minimum, right?
Well, it's a metabolism test. As it's not necessarily a bare minimum, because some people will eat below the RMR, some people will eat above the RMR, depending on what they tell us their lifestyle is like.
Correct.
Okay? So it's not a simple cut and dry formula like these prediction equations are. I mean, that's part of the problem with the prediction equations, is they treat everybody the same, right? And this is why they're inaccurate. So once we have a pretty good idea on the calorie number, well, then we know how much protein they should eat based on their muscle mass. We give them a relatively low-fat diet, and then carbs make up the rest, okay? And we have equations. We have ways to do this that I'm not going to spill here, but yeah, that's where that comes from. So that's how you use those two pieces of information. And then let's say that individual, and then we'll also tell people that they have to track their food. So let's say we give somebody a calorie prescription of 1750. We give them a carb, fat, and protein distribution. We don't care what they eat. We don't care how they hit those numbers. We don't care what kind of foods they eat. All we want to know is how close on average did you get to the calorie, fat, protein, and carb goals? How close did you get to those over time? So let's say they come in for their initial testing. We give them the food prescription. They go for 60 days. Then they come back and we'll give them another DEXA scan, right? So basically, from that second DEXA, we're looking at two things. Did the fat change, and did the muscle change? That's really all we want to know, right? If the fat goes down, that's great. If the fat goes down and the muscle goes down, then we got a problem, right? And we'll be like, all right, why did the muscle go down? And then we'll go to the food logs. Did they hit what they were told to hit? 9 out of 10 times, if they lose muscle, they didn't hit the target, right? Then we can calculate, basically, let's say we tell them to eat 1750 and they eat exactly 1750. And let's say over 60 days, they lost 1 pound of fat. Well, they're in a deficit, but that deficit's relatively small if they only lost 1 pound of fat in 60 days, right?
Yeah.
So we'll probably pull a little bit more calories out of that diet, assuming that their hunger levels assuming they're satisfied and things like that. You have to give people sustainable programs. So if people are not hungry, but they're only in a 100-calorie deficit, they're still going to lose fat. It's just going to take a month to lose a pound.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing, right? Because that means in 12 months, you lost 12 pounds, right, of fat.
Yes.
And then you look like a different person, right? 12 pounds of weight is nothing. You can do that in a week if you just cut carbs, right, and sweat a lot, right? But 12 pounds of fat's they're a very different animal. But you tell people you're going to lose a pound of fat in a month, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, that's not good enough. That's not fast enough. And that's the problem with the weight loss industry.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's exactly. And that's the expectations from a lot of people, I think. And then it's a sales and marketing issue that I hate, to be honest with you, because, it's always like for instance, like when I try to explain to people, I'm like, look, you're going to there's two different ways of looking at weight loss and fat. Like you don't, like someone, like you just said, like someone can lose 10 pounds in a week. Again, like you said, you just cut carbs, sweat, and you're good.
Right.
But when it comes to like you're saying and explaining the important two numbers in a DEXA scan, which are the fat-free mass and the fat mass, like if that stays the same over the course of like 2 months, 3 months, like obviously you're not doing anything. You're just losing water mass.
Right.
And that's what I try to like explain to people. It takes time to lose fat. It's 10 times easier to put fat on than take it off.
Yeah. And, the analogy I use is people often, you hear this old argument about whether diet or exercise is more important. And one of the ways I look at it is I was trying to think of a way, how do I explain this in a way to make people understand and see this? So one day I was at the gas station and I was pumping gas. Mm-hmm. And my truck was empty. And I thought to myself, I'm going to time how long it takes me to fill my tank from empty to full. And it took about 2 minutes. Okay. So it took about 2 minutes for me to fill the tank. I don't care how hard I drive that truck. I can go out there and put that thing to the floor and drive it as hard as I possibly can. I'm never going to empty that tank in 2 minutes. Yeah. Right? No matter how hard I drive the thing, it's going to take me hours and hours and hours to empty the tank because the vehicle is designed to be efficient, right? It's designed to be able to extract as much energy as possible from that fuel and convert it into mechanical energy. So when you think about that, and now you think about the fact that the human body is more efficient than an internal combustion engine.
Yes.
So now, as long as it's easier for you to eat calories than it is to burn them, diet will always be more important than exercise, right? Mm-hmm. So the thing to sort of think to yourself from a weight management perspective is it's always easier to not gain fat in the first place than it is to try and lose it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I totally agree with you. I mean, and that's, the first conversation and I'm sure it's the first conversation that you have with most clients that come into you guys is it's never really about like activity level because I don't really care about that. Cause like at this point, like what are you intaking as far as food goes? Are you intaking anything? Cause sometimes people like just don't eat, which to me, sometimes I don't get, especially athletes. It's mind blowing.
Well, I'll tell you why I think it happens. And in part it's because of researchers, right? So here's, and I've thought about this for a long time because this is a problem that has bothered me basically for my entire career, right? So we have the weight loss. Like, let's say you're a typical person we know that being over fat is a problem. So now we want to research that and figure what's the best way to get fat off of people. Okay. So if I do a conventional exercise study where I put somebody on a treadmill for an hour 3 times a week, or I put somebody on a treadmill for a half hour 3 times a week, of course, the one who runs an hour 3 times a week is going to be more effective, right? They've done more activity. They're going to create a greater deficit. They're going to lose more fat. So the conclusion then is, if you want to lose fat, this is what that exercise prescription should look like. And this is what we've done, right? So the ACSM comes out with these guidelines that says, if you want to lose fat, you have to do greater than 250 minutes of exercise per week, So they come out with these very discrete guidelines because researchers have found out that if you do X amount of activity at X intensity for X time, you're going to lose this much weight. But the problem with that is, so now I come to the conclusion that an hour 3 times a week is more effective than 3 times a week. Yes, okay, that mathematically we can all agree on that. But let's say we give that intervention to two groups of people. And the ones who have to go for an hour quit after 3 months because it's just an hour 3 times a week. It's just too damn long. I just can't do it. But the other group who goes half an hour with a less effective workout can maintain it for a year or more. Which is the more effective program?
Obviously,
right?
Exactly.
Obviously, the one that they can do longer is going to result in more fat loss over time. That's the more effective program, but that's not how we approach weight loss research. We approach weight loss research as, what is the most effective way to lose the most amount of weight? And often it's not even fat. It's what's the most effective way to lose the most amount of weight in the least amount of time. And then we then sort of assume then that we'll just tell people to do that and then they'll keep fat off. We don't, as researchers, we don't consider whether or not they can actually maintain it.
Yeah.
Right? So here's the problem. So weight loss is really a function of 3 separate sort of discrete areas. It's dietary management, right? It's food, it's exercise, and it's mindset, right? So there's exercise psychologists who study how do you get people to adhere. And they're in their own little world over here and they do their little research. Then you have people like me, exercise physiologists, who say, well, if you do this type of exercise at this intensity, you'll burn this fat, and they're in their little world. Then you have the nutritionists over here and say, well, if you eat carbs and you watch insulin, and they're over here doing their thing. But the reality is, an effective weight loss program is the integration and the blending of all 3 of those.
Correct.
And nobody does that well.
Correct.
Because the weight loss industry doesn't thrive on that, because that doesn't produce quick results, right? The weight loss industry thrives on not getting people to keep weight off, because that kills the weight loss industry. The weight loss industry thrives on the failures of people. It thrives on the temporary successes of people where they lose a little bit of weight and then they gain it all back. Because then they'll say to themselves, hey, I tried Jenny Craig last year and I lost 10 pounds. I'm going to try Jenny Craig again because I know it works. So for them, something being effective is not losing weight and keeping it off. Something being effective is just losing weight.
Yeah.
Whereas our approach is completely the opposite. Our approach is, what's effective is not the weight loss. What's effective is adopting the behavior that you can do for the rest of your life, and ultimately optimal changes in body composition will come.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's a very, very different way of looking at it, right?
No, I mean, I think the two, exactly what you said, the 2 biggest things are the mindset and the food.
Right.
I mean, really,
exercise doesn't have much to do with it.
Exactly. And I think the mindset is huge. I think people, when you paint that quote unquote picture and you say, hey, this is what's going to happen, whatever. But even realistically, when you guys probably provide people like the calorie count and, this and this and this, like you can't really paint a picture, because you're not like going to sit there and hold this person's hand forever, or for the whole time that you put them on this thing until you see them again in whatever, you're going to check in with them, but it's going to be one of those things where, is their mindset ready for this? And to be honest with you, I think, another problem with, the fitness industry and weight loss industry, whatever you want to call it, is, just, Instagram, all these media outlets just putting the end result versus showing like, this guy was working like January till that picture was taken in, June. So they don't tell you how long it takes you to get there. It just says, oh, look what happened.
No.
So 20 pounds lighter. But everyone's like wants to be there. And
and the other thing is, you look at Instagram and things like, there are people who are they just genetically look really, really good.
Yeah.
And those people could build a million following on Instagram as a fitness model without ever lifting a weight.
Yeah.
they can.
No,
and that's what happens. You get people who have decent genetics, they work out for 6 months, and all of a sudden they can be on the cover of Oxygen. And they could. So then all of a sudden they get 1 million people following them on Instagram. And there you go. They're right there. You've sort of encapsulated the problem with the weight loss industry today, is that it's not driven. It isn't driven by evidence.
No, it's definitely not. And I mean, and it's unfortunate, but I think there are some people out there that have that background, like the exercise science, math, multiple degrees of it, that are trying to, put that sort of picture out there that it's not what you think it is. It's really like this versus this. It's not like,
right.
This guy, like, he probably has been weight training. He looks like that because he's probably been weight training for like 10 years.
Right.
And Instagram came out like 3 months ago. Like,
right.
Come on. So it's such a bad picture, because it kind of like, it hurts certain people that want to really tell people like, hey, like, this is sustainable for you based on your body type, current body composition. This is the path that is probably going to be the best for you. Based on your exercise frequency, how you like to eat, and things like that. Because I mean, again, I don't tell people I'm going to give you a meal plan, because no one ever uses it.
Right.
Or adhere to it. And again, like, I think, and a lot of people talk about it, it's all about calories in, calories out, but it's not just, what the app says. It's like, there's science to it. And I think a lot of people just still haven't believed in science enough to say like, oh, me spending $200 is going to be, worth it for a DEXA scan and an RMR.
Right. They'd rather spend that $200 on Weight Watchers food.
Exactly.
Right. And lose
your
pounds in 4 weeks. Right. They would.
And then you're going to be back to square one.
Right.
When it comes down to, I think you mentioned this before, when it comes down to, when you provide them like meal, like, or calorie intake number, how much, again, like, I tell this to people all the time, like, how important is it? Let's put it, this is kind of a 2-part question. How important is like resistance training versus cardio? And how important is it like to make sure that you're hitting those protein numbers, especially when you're doing like any type of resistance training,
that's a 2-part question.
So like, how important is it resistance training versus cardio? Like,
okay, from a fat loss perspective?
Yeah, from a fat loss perspective.
Okay. So that sort of goes back to what I said before. So like, if you look at the traditional sort of conventional exercise research, looking at which exercise modality is more effective for fat loss, aerobic exercise wins. Okay. So if you look at your conventional, let's look at a 10-week aerobic exercise program versus a 10-week weight training program, and look at which one results in more fat loss, it's going to be the aerobic training program. Okay. But again, and this is where the extrapolation of that result leads to the failure, I think, of the weight loss prescription, right? Because when it's a natural sort of decision-making process, right? I do this study and I see that aerobic exercise is more effective than resistance training. So then let's make a prescription based on aerobic exercise as the primary form of exercise, right? Well, there are some problems with that. And we know that when you give people aerobic exercise prescriptions, they really are even though they're more effective than resistance training programs, they're still terribly ineffective for fat loss, right? They just generally don't lead to very big changes in body composition without a dietary intervention, right? The other thing is when you look at some of the adaptations that happen as a result of aerobic training, one of those is a potential loss in muscle, because anytime you do an activity, the body wants to adapt to that activity by making it easier the next time you do it, right? So if I'm running down the road doing cardio, the way to make that easier is to make me lighter. Because the lighter I am, the fewer calories I'll burn running down the road, the lower my cardiac output has to be, blah, 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 right? So problem is the body doesn't care whether you lose fat or muscle. It just wants to make you lighter, especially upper body muscle. If I'm a runner, why do I need upper body musculature? I don't, right?
Yep.
But muscle's the metabolic engine that burns fat, right? So I don't want to do an exercise intervention that's going to cause me to lose muscle.
Yeah.
Right? So again, this is why I look at it as, okay, yeah, in the short term, the aerobic exercise program might be more effective for fat loss. But let's look at it over 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Right? So at the end of a 2 or 3 year period, first of all, who is going to stick to the program more? Somebody who does resistance training or somebody who does cardio? Well, it really depends on what you like. But I will tell you, in my experience working in this industry for the past however many years it's been, people complain a hell of a lot more about cardio than they do about weight training. They just do.
Oh,
they do. I hate cardio. They just hate it.
Out about
right?
it.
So the question is, again, if you're not going to do it, is it a good prescription?
Yeah.
I don't think so. So the other thing is, I want somebody to do an exercise program that is going to result in increases in muscle mass, always.
Correct.
Right? Because muscle is so important for glucose control, for calorie burn, for every marker of health. Skeletal muscle is critically important. So why do I want to do an exercise intervention that gets rid of it? I don't understand it, right? So I just think that, and again, you still need to create a calorie deficit. So the question then becomes, how do you create a calorie deficit when you're not doing cardio? Well, you shouldn't be using exercise to create the deficit anyway. You should be using diet to create the deficit, right? So the way we look at it is, if you do weight training and you break down a lot of muscle, that muscle has to repair. And that repair process elevates the resting metabolism. And if you train correctly, using conventional high volume type bodybuilding type workouts, you can elevate the metabolism by 20 to 30% for up to 48 hours after that workout. So, if you have an RMR of 1500 and you can elevate that by 30%, or 20%, and now you're at 1800 instead of 1500. And you do that for, from you work out on Monday and you can elevate it till Wednesday. Then you work on Wednesday, you can elevate it till Friday. You're essentially trying to move the baseline RMR.
Yes.
And that's how you create the deficit.
Yes.
That way you don't run the risk of losing muscle. It's going to take you longer, right? But again, we know that short-term interventions don't work. Yeah. So what if it takes you longer? Wouldn't you rather have it work?
Yeah.
It doesn't work because it's fast. That's why it doesn't work, right? So why would you keep doing it?
Yeah.
Except the fact that it's going to be slow.
Yeah.
And that's what you got to get people to try and understand. And they don't want to do that. We've had people say to us, look, I don't care whether the loss is from muscle or fat. I just want the scale number to be lower. How do you deal with that? How do you work with that school of thought?
I deal with
basically like, I'm ignoring the science, I'm ignoring the evidence, I'm ignoring my health, I just want to be lighter. When you get somebody like that, you're really talking about a different problem. That's an emotional issue more than a physical one.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest problems is just people. I think a lot of people just need to kind of get out of their way and just like listen to like experts and just do the work. Again, it comes back to they just want the quick result.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate because, to be honest with you, most people look better when they have muscle versus like skinny,
right,
that cardio looking body of
just look at a picture of an elite marathoner at 10% fat and an elite sprinter at 10% fat.
Yeah.
They're both at the same body composition, right? But one of them has a lot more muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly people look at that and men or women, You look at a sprinter versus a marathoner, 8 out of 10 people, I would say, are going to say, I want to look like the sprinter.
Yeah.
You're not going to get that way by doing cardio.
No. And it's crazy because people, like, I'll tell them, like, yo, weight train like 3-4 days a week. Okay. And then they want to like do more. And I'm like, well, your body needs to recover. It needs to repair. Like, you need to make sure you're eating enough. There's so many things that happen outside of just the training aspect, even with like some of the athletes that I deal with. And they don't want to believe me on like that your body changes when you're like sleeping, when you're not doing anything, when you're walking around, like doing normal life things.
Right.
That's when like you're going to know
when you're growing.
Exactly. And it's just, and then kind of going on to the next question, it's like an argument of like having enough protein. And when I talk to people about like what they eat, and there's like no protein, right. And they think they're eating protein. I'm like, where?
Peanut butter.
Yeah,
peanut butter.
And it's and then they come back to me and they're like, well, I have nothing's happened. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you eating? Cause like, I'll have people that will, train 2 or 3 days a week and doing things outside of the gym, like maybe doing some running like once or twice a week. But I swear, and I had this conversation with Stephanie about it. It's like, they just do, and you probably see this a lot. They just do the exercise so they can eat whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, if you're coming to me to lose weight and you work out and yes, your metabolic rate is going to increase for a few days because you're strength training, but you can't just go home and pound the refrigerator.
Mm-mm. No, and a lot of people think they can, and that's especially true. I don't know. I think that seems especially true with aerobic I shouldn't say that. I mean, I don't know if people tend to treat themselves more with cardio than they do with weight training. I don't know. I've just seen so many people do 20 minutes on a treadmill, then walk up to a juice bar and get a 500 calorie recovery shake.
Well, I mean, that's because they're looking at the either using some type of technology that they're seeing on their watch.
Yeah, right. Or the treadmill told them they burned 900 calories or something like that.
It's crazy because most of those treadmills are just as incorrect as the app.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just you put in your weight and it's just using a mechanical, force times distance over time equation to determine how much work you're doing, right? Yeah,
I mean, it's unfortunate because there's a lot of good information out there and it's put out on a regular basis, and people seem to just navigate to these like quick fixes versus this like, sustainable lifestyle.
Well, it's not sexy. Nobody wants to hear,
of course,
portion control, calorie balance, macro distribution. Paleo is sexy. Keto is sexy.
Yeah.
And that's what people like, because they say, well, you're saying I have to do portion control and I have to count my calories and I have to incorporate some type of discipline. I don't want to do that. Just tell me what I can and can't eat. Yeah. So if you go keto, it's simple.
Yeah.
Just don't eat any carbs and do whatever you want. They're like, all right, I can do that. Till they try it.
And they realize like it sucks.
Right.
Yeah.
So they realize everything has carbohydrate in it.
Well, yeah, I mean, because again, most people, it's just the way they intake protein, I think is because there's so many people I feel like that don't intake meat like we used to. I think a lot of people are like
that's very true.
Navigate like away from meat and trying to do these other things to get their protein intake, like bars and. I'm not saying believe me, and I know, like, there's nothing really wrong with protein powder, especially, pre and post workout. But everyone's going to this like vegan, vegetarian, like, and trying to get their proteins from these, vegan, vegetarian options.
Yeah.
And they're not realizing that they are so high in carbs versus the protein value. I see it all the time, and people are like, and they don't realize that. They don't see the bioavailability of protein versus the carb, and it's bad because they're like, well, I'm not losing weight. I'm like, yeah, where are you getting your protein sources?
And protein's important. That's another thing that's confusing, because you have the dietetics world who's still on board with the RDA, which is 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight, which the latest review by the International Society of Sports Nutrition just came out and said that something like protein intakes, I think their words were, far in excess of the RDA, lead to favorable improvements in body composition with resistance training individuals. So it's very clear that when you're in a calorie deficit, protein needs go up.
Yeah.
And when you're resistance training, protein needs go up even further than that.
Yeah.
And given the fact that the protein has such a high thermic effect, meaning that it speeds the metabolism just by virtue of eating it, it should be a much more stressed component of a weight management diet than it really is. People sort of look at it as an afterthought, and especially the vegan crowd, because the vegan crowd is always downplaying protein because they know the most biologically highest quality protein comes from animal sources.
Mm-hmm.
And, most people are vegan for ethical reasons rather than health reasons. So, they tend to, I think they tend to not really appreciate or at least recognize the full spectrum of protein's benefits.
Yeah.
Especially in reference to exercise. They just downplay it because they don't want people eating it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy because, I understand the ethical reasons, but there's just too much research out there now that even says that, crop growing versus doing something to an animal is nowhere more harmful than what you're, just constantly making crops. But anyway, that's a whole another topic. But yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy and interesting, figuring out ways to, navigate people's mindset on, how to, how to bring them to a place where you're can help them versus just shoving this information into their face and saying this is what you have to do.
Right.
I want to figure out ways to have those conversations. I'm sure it's hard. I'm sure you probably go through difficult conversations with people all the time about, because they're on some sort of routine, and getting off of this routine is so hard.
Yeah.
It's
it's more the expectations of the simple things that we have to talk them out of. So we'll be talking to people and we'll say, walk us through your day and tell us what you eat.
Yeah. Right.
And they'll say something, well, I know I shouldn't do this, but in the morning I'll eat toast. Wait. What do you mean? What's wrong with toast all of a sudden? Well, it's carbohydrate. I shouldn't be eating carbs. That kind of stuff. People are apologizing for eating bread. And I'm like, wow. Is that what we've come to in this world, where people are apologizing for eating bread? So I think bread is the most commonly eaten food in the world.
Easy to make.
Bread is not your problem, right? So anyway, it's those kinds of things. It's trying to get people to unlearn their preconceived notions about food, because they say it all the time. Well, I know I shouldn't do this, or I know I shouldn't. I know this is bad. They preface things that they say with some disclaimer, sort of like this presumption that we feel the same way. Somebody will say, well, I can't help it. I know I shouldn't, but I love chocolate chip cookies. Who doesn't love chocolate chip cookie? Why would you apologize for that, right? The problem isn't eating chocolate chip cookies. The problem is sitting down and eating 2 sleeves of Chips Ahoy 3 times a week. That's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what people don't understand. They think that in order to be able to lose weight and live at a reasonable, healthy body composition, you have to eliminate all those foods from your diet. And nothing could be further from the truth. And people part of the reason people are so unsuccessful is because they restrict those things. They put such impossible expectations on themselves that it's so easy to fall off the wagon and then beat yourself up about it, and you go down that road. So yeah, people just need to cut themselves some slack, and don't feel bad about eating the foods that you like.
Yeah. So to kind of like sum this up, what's the goal what has been the goal with the Miller method? Obviously, the GW is there, but like, I know you really, I think it's more, I'm sure it's more important to you than GW, but like what's your guys' goal with it? I probably should have asked Stephanie, but.
Well, look, our goal has always been, and we started this more from an academic perspective, not so much from a business perspective. Yeah. We were just frustrated, basically frustrated working in the weight loss industry and hearing the same stories over and over again of people. And one of the more frustrating things about it was people would come to us and say, well, I met with this dietitian. Mm-hmm. Right? And they're like, okay, here we go. And, and the dietitian is talking about my plate and eating the rainbow and different colors. And so, and this is somebody who comes here with a genuine problem, can't lose weight, thinks she has potential thyroid problems. And this person is talking to her about my plate. Okay. So those are the kinds of things that we got just sick of hearing. Right. And what we want to, and things like low carb dieting and all these sort of pseudoscience fad type diets, we really want to change the industry in a way so that people are not, so basically so that using metabolism and body composition and food tracking and objective measurements for weight loss becomes the standard of practice, rather than this holistic sort of approach. Well, we're going to teach people to listen to their body and this and that. That's all great, but that alone isn't enough. And objective measurements are great, but alone they're not enough. You really need to blend those two things. You need to have a blending of the science and the objective measurement with a somewhat of an intuitive, holistic approach to eating and exercise. And if you can do that correctly, the goal there is to end up not with the most effective weight loss program in 6 weeks, but what kind of diet and eat, or what kind of eating and physical activity strategies can you incorporate that you can do for a lifetime?
Correct.
Right? That's the goal. The goal isn't tied to bringing down your weight, or the goal is tied to adopting the lifestyle, and those other things will come.
Yeah.
Right?
So what are like the lengths of your programs?
Well, one thing, typically, we think that you need about 3 months with somebody. You really need about 3 months with somebody to really get things dialed in. But after that, our goal is not to get a client and keep them on the hook for the rest of their life. Our goal is to teach people what they need from a macronutrient and calorie perspective in order to fuel themselves optimally. And that's it. Once they learn how to do that, they don't need to be a client of ours anymore. Right? There's enough people. We have 42% of Americans obese. There's enough people in this world that, we're not going to run out of customers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right? So our goal is not to get somebody, and I know it sounds counterintuitive to a business. We're not trying to get somebody and keep them on the hook and provide them, because there's not much to provide. Once somebody knows what their physiology needs, they don't really need us much anymore,
Well, so, what about like, yes, they figure out the macro and all that, but are they able to continue working with you if?
Sure, and a lot of people
program them like a new 3 months.
And we do that. Most of the people that work with us after those 3 months are over, they still want to continue working with us, even though they're getting success, just because of the personal interaction and it's really the support that they get from us along the way. Yeah. So we do have a really good retention in that respect. But we also know that those people, let's say something happened in those people's lives where they couldn't afford to come to us anymore. Mm-hmm. We know that they're going to take the skills that we've taught them and they're going to be perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. It's not like somebody is getting a meal plan from us every week and now they can't afford it. And they're like, oh shit, what am I going to do? Yeah. And they just start scarfing down M&Ms because they don't have the meal plan, you know? So, you know, that's the kind of stuff that we hate. And that's the kind of stuff we want to avoid. Because we're really we're teachers, first of all, more than anything. And that's really what we want to do, is educate people on these lifestyle strategies.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that again, like, and that's, you know, kind of the same mindset I have. I think it's a lot of it is education and a lot of people are just misinformed.
Right.
Again, you know, getting media saying this and that, reading this or hearing it from somebody else that heard it from whoever. Mm-hmm. And it's hard because, you know, you hear from a friend and that, you know, oh, that friend had success with it. So I'm going to do what they're doing. So
right.
Okay.
Right.
So
I'm going to do what they're doing. Right.
But then you realize, like, 3-4 months down the road, sometimes that person is back to you because they realize, like, that person, you know, is not sustainable.
Right.
So,
right.
And I think that's the goal. I think that should be the goal for all, like, sort of.
Well, we tell everybody, one of the things that we always say is, look at what you're doing right now. If you can't picture yourself doing that forever, then just stop and do something else, because it's not going to work. You know, whatever you're doing, because it's temporary, means it's eventually going to, if it's working really, really fast and you're thinking to yourself, there's no way I could keep this up, then stop. Yeah. Because as soon as you stop, it's all going to come back.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a plan in place for when it's over.
Yeah.
Right? And if you don't have a plan, the thing is, the idea is not to put in a plan that's going to change at some point. The idea is to put in the right plan to begin with, and then your body composition will eventually catch up to where it's supposed to be. It's not like the plan to get you to a point and then that plan changes. I mean, yeah, you make adjustments along the way if your metabolism goes up or down and things like that. But for the most part, once you've found, hey, this is what I need from a calorie and macro distribution perspective, you just stay there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I will, I'll put all your contact info, you know, in the show notes and stuff like that.
Awesome.
And obviously, you know, hopefully the lab opens.
Yeah.
So you can come check it out again. But man, I really appreciate it. A lot of
my pleasure.
Good information. I mean, I could talk to you forever about this stuff.
Yeah, I know. Well, I can talk about it forever.
But I don't want to take a lot of your time. But thanks again. I appreciate it. And
all right, buddy.
I'll talk to you soon, Todd.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you, Julian.
Thanks for listening to Train to Perform with Julian Sisman. Learn how you can work with Julian in a personal training session, either online or in person, at prepareforperformance.com. And follow on social media for more tips on training, fitness, and sports performance. On Twitter at jsisman_PFP and Instagram at prepareforperformance.